This final video points to a couple of examples that might be thought to speak to Beethoven's continued influence in the 20th and 21st centuries. We'll first briefly discuss a movement from a sinfonia by European avant-garde composer Luciano Berio. Then we'll trace the use of Beethoven's Ode to Joy tune in 20th century political movements. As you watch the video and consider your own encounters with the music of Beethoven, keep the following questions in mind. Does Beethoven and his music continue to influence wider society today? Is Beethoven and his music still influential for classical music today? How so? If this is not the case, what are the primary influences of classical music today? Make sure you also read the article about text, music, and meaning in Berio's Sinfonia and the excerpt from the book about the political history of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony on the course website for more details about the examples given in this presentation. Luciano Berio's Sinfonia might be one of the greatest examples of modern, perhaps postmodern, musical collage. This composition for orchestra and 8 amplified voices quotes no fewer than 6 different literary texts and the music of no fewer than 13 composers. The principal musical allusion for the Italian composer Berio comes from the music of Mahler, particularly from Mahler's Second Symphony. The third movement of Berio's work in particular uses Mahler's expressive title for his own third movement of the Second Symphony, and it also uses Mahler's iconic accompanimental figure, which, as you'll recall, came from Mahler's song about St. Anthony preaching to the fish. Beethoven is not Berio's primary musical referent. In fact, the only quotation from Beethoven is a short reference to the second movement of the Pastoral Symphony. It might be argued, however, that Berio's merging of voices and orchestra in the Sinfonia and the strong influence of Beethoven on Mahler amount to Beethoven's continued presence in classical music of the recent past. This is not the Beethoven of the heroic period, but it is the Beethoven who experimented with different textures and forms and the integration of word with music and of vocal music with instrumental music in his last works. A very different way in which Beethoven's music might be thought still influential is in the use of his Ode to Joy theme from the finale of the Ninth Symphony in 20th century cultural and political movements. Esteban Buch's monograph traces the uses of the Ninth Symphony for political purposes from the 1830s through the 1980s. In Chapter 12 of Buch's book, From Apartheid's Anthem to the Dismantling of the Berlin Wall, the author compares the adoption of the Ode to Joy tune as the national anthem of Rhodesia in 1974 to a lengthy conversation engaged in by the European Union about adopting an anthem of its own. In making this comparison, Buch notes the contradictions involved in the use of the tune in Rhodesia in the 1970s. Rhodesia was a racist state, governed by its 4% white minority, and it was evoking a melody that was connected to ideals of universal brotherhood. The melody was from a European society, but by that time, by the 1970s, this European society had rather explicitly rejected the practices of colonial racism. The European Union, on the other hand, and at the same time, was looking for a symbol of a European idea. Like the Rhodesians, they eventually adopted only the tune and not the text as their anthem. This was in 1985. Buch's final example in the chapter is of the performance by Leonard Bernstein and orchestra of the Ninth Symphony in Berlin of December of 1989, shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall. There, Bernstein, as conductor, chose to replace the word joy or Freude with the word freedom or Freiheit. All 3 examples of the chapter suggest that by the 1980s, Beethoven's Ode to Joy tune, as much as its text, had become a symbol of history. As Buch's conclusion makes clear, for the author, the Ode to Joy tune has functioned in history as an open symbol that has taken on varying and even contradictory meanings. Although there are pros and cons to a philosophical claim of an open concept or an open symbol, this sort of claim does lead one to take seriously the subtleties involved in the symbolic use of music. Given the use of the Ode to Joy from institutions as different as the Nazi Third Reich and the Olympic Games, a bit more care in our interpretations of the meanings of Beethoven's music would seem to be a good place to start. With this video, our study of Beethoven before and after has ended. I hope that you have gained knowledge and understanding of the distinctive contributions of Beethoven's music to Western music history, as well as a sense of important currents in Western music history before and after Beethoven. I also hope this course has led you to think more critically about the music of the past and how it relates to the music of our present. As you continue to study, perform, compose, and teach, I encourage you to ask the same sorts of questions of the music that you encounter that we have asked of Beethoven and his music. It is my belief that fuller understanding of past music will enrich our search for and production of music of the future.